Now, with the recent performances of fighters like Dmitry Bivol and Artur Beterbiev, these guys look like very, very good lightweights. I mean, Artur Beterbiev has a 100% KO ratio. I mean, that is ridiculous. He absolutely dismantled Joe Smith Jr. in his last fight, and Dmitry Bivol comfortably outboxed Canelo Alvarez in his last fight. And now a contender, someone who looks like he's trying to get in a position for the belts is Anthony Yard. Now, first of all, what I think Anthony Yard should do is, if he is a mandatory, I don't know if he is a mandatory, but let's just say hypothetically he was a mandatory to fight, either Bivol or Artur Beterbiev, he should just take step-aside money so they could have a unification fight between Beterbiev and Bivol. We always want to see undisputed champions. And then he could fight the winner of a Beterbiev versus a Bivol. But what I just wanted to raise today is Anthony Yard a world-level fighter? Can he make it at the very, very top level? Anthony Yard a couple of years ago had a very competitive fight against, what's his face? His name's, Kovalev. People were very critical of Anthony Yard, being knocked down by a jab, but that was due to fatigue. Once you're really, really tired and you don't have much energy, really any punch can, end it for you. And Anthony Yard almost stopped Kovalev in that fight. Almost, just wasn't quite able to get the stoppage. So this is someone who's shown good ability at the elite level. I think Anthony Yard is a bit of a boxer puncher. He can do a little bit of everything. He's not necessarily someone who's going to knock everyone out and is the biggest puncher in his division, though he is a big puncher. He's very technically skilled, but he's not the most technically skilled guy because he's been outboxed by guys who are domestic level fighters such as Lyndon Arthur. And we saw that in the rematch of the Lyndon Arthur fight, he was able to really put it on Lyndon Arthur and make the correct adjustments. Though I feel like he should have done it in the first fight. After a couple of rounds, it's much easier said than done. It was a close fight even. It could have gone either way, so I understand why he continued to jab and try to outbox Lyndon Arthur, though in the first fight, Lyndon Arthur was using his physical advantages. I think he's a shade taller, his arms are slightly longer, so it helped him. But when Anthony Yard really went into 4th, 5th gear in the rematch, he easily dispatched of Lyndon Arthur. We saw his power, his tenacity, and his aggression. But is that really enough to beat somebody like a Artur Beterbiev or a Bivol? No. Where I'm really questioning Yada's defense, because against someone like Beterbiev, he doesn't throw a lot of straight shots. He throws a lot of hooks and, uppercuts, which is very unconventional. He's throwing punches from, I wouldn't say they're the most awkward angles, but just punches that fighters don't regularly throw. He doesn't throw his jab and his straight right hand as much as he throws his hooks and his uppercuts. So Anthony Yard probably won't be used to, punches coming in from that angle on a regular basis, and it might be able to break through of the guard of Anthony Yard and really hurt him. I do think Anthony Yard has got a pretty good chin, but I wonder how that would hold up against somebody like a Beterbiev. And would his aggression that he showed in the rematch of the Lyndon Arthur fight, will that translate in a fight against Dmitry Bivol? Bivol is much more durable, let's say, than Lyndon Arthur. We saw him take Canelo's power, although Canelo is not a 175-pounder. This is someone who's moved up several weight classes. But we do know that Canelo is a pretty big puncher, at least in his weight classes. He's a ferocious puncher. But Bivol took all of those shots on the forearms and everything. He was able to have a tight guard and just take all of Canelo's shots like no problem. And he was able to land punches in quick combinations. A lot more conventional. He throws a lot more straight punches. So it'd be interesting to see Anthony Yard in a fight against Dmitry Bivol. I mean, I wonder which fight is more dangerous. I think most people would say Beterbiev is more dangerous because he has a lot more power. But I feel like Bivol on his day, if Bivol really turns up, he could probably easily outbox Yard. But Yard is someone who I do believe in. You know, he has the athletic uh, strengths there. He's someone who's physically strong. He's got pretty good hand speed. And I do feel like, physically he could compete with a Bivol and a Beterbiev. I doubt he would get bullied in the ring against specifically Bivol. I don't think he'd get bullied by Bivol. Beterbiev might be different because Beterbiev is so physically strong. Though Anthony Yard, he does have talent. He does have certain things that he could do to negate the strength of Beterbiev. So I just feel like it's an interesting fight. We do need to see Anthony Yard fight more guys at the very, very top of the division. Maybe Anthony Yard could fight someone like a Joe Smith Jr. and we could see what he could do and compare his performance to Beterbiev. But we all know that boxing doesn't necessarily work like that, because fighter A can beat fighter B can beat fighter C, and then fighter C could beat fighter A. For instance, Muhammad Ali, he lost to Joe Frazier in the first fight. Joe Frazier got absolutely destroyed by George Foreman. He lost to George Foreman twice. So everyone thought that, Foreman is going to, have an easy day with Ali. And Ali, beat Foreman very, very easily. Much easier than he beat Frazier. So, it doesn't always work like that. But it would be interesting to see how Anthony Yard would fare against someone like a Joe Smith Jr. It's probably never going to be the same Joe Smith Jr. just because of his punch resistance. I imagine his punch resistance is, shot to pieces. He took, several big punches from Beterbiev. He was knocked down several times. So even if he were Anthony Yard hypothetically stop Joe Smith Jr., a lot of people will say, that's just Beterbiev's leftovers, and Beterbiev already dealt with Joe Smith Jr., and Joe Smith Jr. is done, his punch resistance is gone, and so on and so forth. So yeah, that will also be interesting to see how Joe Smith Jr. deals with, all of those knockdowns, and see how the fight against Beterbiev really affects his punch resistance, in the fights in the future for him. So yeah, with Anthony Yard, it's hard to pinpoint one thing about him. He seems like he is good in all aspects, but is he great in all departments? That's up for debate. I feel like he's just a lot more effective as a pressure fighter rather than trying to fight on the front foot or trying to counter punch. So I feel like that's what he needs to do from now on in his career, be a pressure fighter. Though you will have to adapt and adjust. You can't always do the same thing. For instance, does he want to be a pressure fighter in the Beterbiev fight? Maybe it will benefit him a bit more to box and move, and then also try to push Beterbiev back here and there. But be a little bit more neutral in your approach. Don't be hyper aggressive and try to look for a knockout and force a knockout when it's not there. Beterbiev is very dangerous. You want to land punches and combinations and then move out of the pocket. Be a little bit more sophisticated. Maybe in a fight against Dmitry Bivol, that's where Anthony Yard can afford to be a little bit more aggressive. Because obviously Bivol doesn't pose as much power, though Bivol would be moving on the back foot, using a lot of lateral movement, distance control, and his quick hand speed to kind of offset Anthony Yard. So those are just my thoughts. I'm really interested to see how Anthony Yard can do at the very elite level of the light heavyweight division, specifically against Beterbiev and Bivol. I'm someone who is a big believer in Anthony Yard. I have been impressed by his performances, but obviously some people aren't as convinced by him, saying that, the Kovalev fight was the really big step-up fight. He wasn't able to get through it, that, his first fight against Lyndon Arthur, he wasn't good enough, and that he can't make adjustments, and that he's vulnerable, and that he hasn't fought enough quality opponents. And I do get that, but I do see talent. Just from the eye test, there are certain things Anthony Yard can do that can offset or maybe negate the strengths of a Beterbiev and a Bivol. So it's very, very interesting. I'd love to see them all fight each other. That's what we really need. We need to see everyone fight each other. You know, leave no stone unturned. If you really want to be the greatest, you know, in your division, the best in your division, the greatest in your era, the greatest of all time, you have to fight all of the elite guys. And, you know, in the case of Anthony Yarde, he needs to fight Bivol and Bataviev, and vice versa. They all need to fight each other. You know, I don't know who will reign supreme once it's all said and done, because these are all top guys, you know, so best of luck to all three of them. So let me know what you guys in the comment section below think. Who do you rate the highest, you know, out of, I'd say, the top 3 light heavyweights, you know, Yarde, Bataviev, and Bivol? Do you favor Yarde or Bataviev or Bivol? You're not sure. You know, I don't blame you for not being sure. Maybe we should just wait and see rather than just speculate. But yeah, Anthony Yarde, he's one to watch. Well, we already know about Anthony Yarde. Everyone already knows he's a top light heavyweight. But definitely don't underestimate him, because I feel like people look past him. You know, a few people that I see, you know, say that, oh, he'd get destroyed by Bivol, he'd get destroyed by Bataviev, oh, he got knocked out by Kovalev. But, you know, I'm not so sure that's the case. Alright guys, peace.